Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from October 28th, 2022. I'm recording this on April 27th, 2023. Obviously you won't watch this for a couple days. Recording it a little early this week just for life reasons. As always, I give you those dates so you know when this information was actually most relevant because the market is always moving and changing. As always, we're also looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. Those are the two lists I've been using now for over 4 years to do this, to look back on videos. And basically, we're looking at these two lists. They were the hot comics, the books that were moving because of option news or whatever. They were hot covers, whatever, that people were chasing in the moment to see how they're doing just 6 months later. And see if it was worth being patient or if you should have chased them. Generally, it's been better to be patient. This week, we got 18 books to talk about. Let's see what we can learn so we all make a little bit better decisions going forward. First up this week, we got Witchblade number 10, the first appearance of the Darkness. And this was rumors that TV series was in development. We've heard this for a lot of 90s Image characters in the last couple of years. So far, we haven't seen any of these projects come to fruition. But back then, the first appearance of the Darkness was jumped up to $25, $30 book. Now it's still a $10 to $30 book. 9.8 will cost you $70 to $125. So it hasn't plummeted, but it's definitely an I'll be down and an I'll be back. It's most of the sales are below the $25 mark in that 10 to 20-ish kind of range, with just a few still in the 20 to 30. Again, who knows when this will happen or if this will happen. And that's just been the nature of this. So as always, a better time to buy it now than back then. Next, we have Youngblood number 2, the first appearance of Prophet. This has been on the list multiple times. There's supposedly a series coming now. This time it was because Jake Gyllenhaal was supposedly attached. Caused raw copies to jump all the way back up to 10. There's a ton of these out there. 9.8 go for $120. Now it's still a $5 to $15 book. 9.8, $60 to $125. I put this kind of steady. I'll be back. Still kind of in that same range, but it's definitely fallen back a little bit. So, yeah, definitely, it didn't have that far to go to drop back. So, yeah, if you paid $10 for it, you really didn't lose anything. Next, we have a book that's on the list for the second week in a row. This is Geiger number 1. Again, this was option news. We talked about last week, $10 to $15 for a raw copy, 9.8, 100. Basically, this is one of those where it switched lists between weeks. Same values, just switched lists between the weeks based on when they put their lists out. And as we talked about last week, now it's a $1 to $10 book, 9.8, 25 to 90, with most of the sales closer to the 25, but or in the 40, 50, $60 range. Put it as a down and I'll be back, just like I did last week. It's borderline trap on the 9.8 side, but definitely a book that was, you did not need to chase in the moment, and a good time to buy it if you're interested in it. Next, we're going to move into covers. We got, 2, 4, 5 covers this week, which is not a lot of covers. First up, we have Halloween, number 1, the 1 in 10 action figure variant. Raw copies of this one. So we get an action figure of Jack-O-Lantern. I don't know who this character is supposed to be, but anyway, this 1 in 10 action figure variant was going for $20, so double ratio. Now raw copies are going for $6. And that's just one sale. There was only one sale of this book back then, or in the last few months. So this has definitely turned into a dumpster fire. A $20 book is now a $6 book. Definitely not worth chasing back then. Now we have Star Trek number 1, the David Aja variant. This was just a regular variant, but it was going for $15 to $20 out the gate. Now it's a $5 to $15 book. 9.8 recent sale only went for $45. So this one really didn't hold up. Down and I'll be back. You could actually see borderline down in a trap, but most of the sales are still 10 to 15. Again, another book. Cool cover. I really like this cover. And I'm not a huge Star Trek fan, but I do enjoy Star Trek. I love this cover, but definitely one that's not worth a whole lot at the moment. All right, next we have another book that's on the list for the second week in a row, and that is Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur number 1, the NYCC variant, animation variant. Last week we talked about it. It was basically one, over $100. By this point, it was up to $215 for raw copies. Now it's a 150 to 225. So this has been very steady. A little bit of an I'll be back, as most of the sales are under $200, but this has been a very steady book. Last week it was still up from the first week. This is one of those that second week peak didn't actually fall off. That's pretty rare, but it did happen here. So yeah, we'll see. I don't think it hits the list again, but definitely a book that is continuing to hold a lot of value. Next, we have Strange Academy Finals #1. The Peach Momoko 1 in 50. Obviously, there's a Peach Momoko ratio variant for Strange Academy #1 with magic on it. This is another magic cover. This 1 in 50 was going for 90 to 100. So only about double ratio, which usually means kind of a trap that it was going to end up around ratio. But this one has held a little better. 40 to 120, although there's only a couple sales over 100. Most of the sales are like the $80, $70, $60 range. So yeah, this one's definitely backed up some. 9.8 on this will cost you 170 to 175. So we'll call this down, and then I'll be back on this one, this Peach Momoko variant. Still a lot of interest in the Strange Academy series. I think people really, really enjoyed this. Whether they make it into a series or a Disney Plus series or anything anytime soon, I think people just love this comic, which is always cool to see a book like that on the list. Next, we have Moon Knight #1, the Bill Sienkiewicz 1 in 25. Never can go wrong with Bill Sienkiewicz Moon Knight. Back then, this 1 in 25 was going for 25 to 55, so only ratio to double. And that's pretty much where it's settled, is ratio to a little less than double. Kind of call this steady, I'll be back. You could maybe say steady down, I'll be back, but it's still mostly in that same range, mostly $30 to $40. A really cool cover. I actually really like this one, and it actually held, I guess, but at the value it was, it's really never taken off or done anything too great. All right, with that, we have 2 Comic Buzz books. We have Venom #27, the first appearance of Codex, the alternate version of Dylan, and basically this was coming back into the Venom storyline at that point, and caused a 300% increase in sales, but not really a bump in value. It was still only a $6 book, which is slightly over cover. 9.8s were only going for $60, and that's still a $2 to $10 book, which is basically a cover price book. That kind of variation. Back then I said whatever, and it's, we'll call it steady, I'll be back. There was no reason to chase it then, and yeah, you can pretty much just get this book for cover if you can find it, or maybe less in a back issue bin. Not a lot of people chasing this particular book. Next, our other Comic Buzz book was Batman #89, the first cameo appearance of Punchline. And this hit the list because Punchline was getting their own series back then, was just starting. Caused raw copies of this to jump back up to $50, 9.8, 130. And it's basically sitting right there, 30 to 60 for a raw copy, 1 to 150 for 9.8. So we're still on this steady and worth it. And really, these Punchline books, they jumped a bunch when they first came out. They fell back a little bit, and then they've kind of just settled in this range. And this seems to be where they've just been now for quite a while. The Hell Arisen #3, which is their first full appearance, is a little more than this, but not a lot more. And these 2 books kind of go in this range, and they've been very steady. There's interest in Punchline, but it's not a character that's really jumped to a huge value. Next, we have several DC TV movies type stuff, which was all before fully going on with the James Gunn stuff. So it'll be interesting to see. Some of this isn't really, may not actually still happen the way we think it's going to. First up is Green Lantern #87, the first appearance of Jon Stewart. Now, this is a great key no matter what. Great character. Back then, raw copies were 150 to 400. A 9.2 went for 1,200. Now it's 125 to 600 for raw copies. Recent sales, 9.2, 1,300. So I call this another steady and worth it. A lot of interest in Jon Stewart. This is a great book. Whether or not the WB show is focused on him or not, people are going to want, and people love this book and are going to pay good money for it. All right, next we have Booster Gold #1, the first appearance of Booster Gold. This is basically, I guess this was right after the James Gunn announcement. I correct myself here based on my notes, and it's just the character people thought he would use. We don't have anything official yet, but back then raw copies were 75, 9.8s were 250. Now raw copies are 15 to 100. 9.8s have jumped up. There's 338. There was actually a sale for like over 500 almost 3 months ago. Not a ton of sales, so on the 9.8 side, but yeah, so we'll call this one another steady worth it. 9.8s are maybe up, but the raw copies are still setting it right in the same range, so that's what we're gonna go with here on Booster Gold. I know a lot of people love this character. He's an okay character for me, but I definitely think at some point James Gunn is going to use Booster Gold, just because it fits too well. Next, we have Justice Society of America, #1, the first appearance of Cyclone. This was right before the Black Adam movie came out, or right as the Black Adam movie came out. Raw copies were going for $20, 9.8 going for $100. Now it's a $5 to $25 book, 9.8, 80 to 125. We'll call this down and I'll be back. Actually didn't back up as much as I expected. I actually enjoyed this portrayal of the character in the Black Adam movie, but there wasn't much else I enjoyed about that movie. But I did enjoy this character. But yeah, the movie didn't really work. We know we're not getting any more from that side of the universe from James Gunn. So yeah. So probably not going to see Cyclone again. But this book is actually held better than I expected given that information. All right, we still got several books left, all MCU related. First up, we have Astonishing X-Men #6, first appearance of Abigail Brand, who everyone thought was the most likely character for Emilia Clarke to be playing in Secret Invasion. Turns out that's not who she's playing. Back then, this book was 30 to 40, 9.8, 210. Now it's 10 to 35, 9.8, 135 to 200. So again, another book that's dropped, but not as far as I would have thought. Still just an I'll be back. We'll see. I'm surprised by the character choice for Emilia Clarke, but we'll see what it turns into. So, all right. With that, we got 4 books left. We got first up of those is Nova #8, the first appearance of Cosmo, who of course is appearing again in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which is just getting ready to come out. So you'd think maybe there would even be a bump on this book. Not really. Back then it was 25 to 50. Now it's 15 to 50, 9.8, 300. So this is another very steady. I'll be back, if anything, as several of the sales are pretty low. You can actually do on the lower end of that range. So you could do pretty well on this book. And that's even with the movie coming in, 2 weeks. So yeah, we'll see. I would guess in 6 months this will be even lower as we get past the movie. Next, we have Avengers #6, the first appearance of Azari, which is the son of Storm and T'Challa. People were expecting we were going to get that in the Black Panther movie, and we got a version of T'Challa's son, but not this version, because we don't have Storm in this universe, so they used a different name. Back then, raw copies were 20 to 30 in the lead up before the Black Panther movie came out. Now it's a $5 to $8 book. Yeah, this is a dumpster fire. I predicted Trap. I should have predicted. I was wrong. It could have been way worse than that. So yeah, this book has fallen off the map because this character wasn't used. Next, we have Young Avengers #6, the first appearance of Cassie Lang as Stature. Back then, we learned, I think by then we had learned that was going to be the name that she was going to go by in the Ant-Man movie. It was $30 to $40 back then, 9.8, 200. Now it's 5 to 25, 9.8, 80 to 150. So yeah, on the raw side, this is a dumpster fire. 9.8 side, it's Trap, dumpster fire on that border. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanium didn't do great. I thought Cassie was fine. I enjoyed the movie. It wasn't great, but I got enjoyment out of it. And that's all I really usually ask for, but I'm probably easier to please than most. But yeah, this book has come crashing back down, which is not unusual for any MC book lately. Once the movie comes and goes, they all seem to crash, no matter how the movie's received. Next, we have Avengers #8, the first appearance of Kang the Conqueror. Obviously, also related to Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and just the next big bad in the Avengers universe, which has become a bit of a mess with the actor and everything else. But back then, raw copies were 400 to 1,000 generally, although a really high-grade copy went for 3,000. 6.5 was 1850, 4.0, 835. Now raw copies are like 200 to 1100, so basically that same kind of range. We didn't have a really high grade raw sale recently. 6.0, which is kind of as close as I get, 1250, which means the 6.5 is probably around 15, 16 at the moment. 4.0, 550 to 600, so that's definitely backed up some. So we'll call it down, and then I'll be back on Kang. A lot up in the air right now on what they're going to do, how Marvel's going to react to what's going on with the actor, but Kang is still probably here to stay in some form or another. So my guess is this book will jump again at some point. And then just long term, this is probably a straight cash book just in general. So that is this week's list. We had 18 books to talk about. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.